Hello, everyone. I'm Pallab.
And I'm Nardos, and we're so excited to be here with you today.
While we're getting for the lesson, Nardos, do you plan on submitting a project for the Coolest Projects competition?
I do. I know that they take people up to 18, so I can participate this year and next. What about you?
I think I'm going to do it as well. I've heard that they take projects from not only Scratch, but various other types as well, such as web apps, mobile apps, and advanced programming projects.
Yep. So the Coolest Projects competition is still open for you to register. So you can sign up after the live stream using the link in the chat or the description below.
And another gentle reminder to everyone to be respectful while using the chat. Failing to do so will result in being banned from the live stream. Now that that's out of the way, let's get started with today's episode. Namaste, everyone.
This is the 7th week of the Starting from Scratch series. So we just wanted to say that it's been an absolute pleasure to be working on this. If you haven't done so already, click on the red subscribe button down below and the notification bell so that you are notified every time that we go live. So, Pallab, what are we going to be doing today?
Excellent question, Nardos. So, as always, we'll start off with studio time. Then, we're going to be making a project about ice cream. Wow, just saying that makes me hungry. And last but not the least, we'll be introducing the topic for next week's lesson.
So, today we will learn how to use lists and how to use input blocks.
These are all of your Scratch mentors. You may recognize some of them from previous episodes, and you'll be meeting the others very, very soon.
And these are all their Scratch usernames, so you can take a picture and follow us on Scratch.
Okay, so Nardos, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself?
So, hello everyone. My name is Nardos, and I'll be one of your mentors today. I am in 11th grade, and I live in Virginia, USA.
And hello again, everyone. I'm Pallab, and I'm your other mentor for today. I live in Bangalore, India, and I'm in the 11th grade as well. Now that we've introduced ourselves, let's get started. Last week, Vagish and Nora taught us about functions. Nardos, do you want to kick us off with this week's studio time?
Yeah, let's do it.
We got so many excellent week 6 submissions in our studio. There were so many projects that followed the right protocol, including the right file name, instructions, and notes, and they went above and beyond to creatively modify their project. We're going to highlight these two projects because the creators really made the game their own by exploring different sprites and code and backdrops as well. The first project we're going to be looking at was by Khadija.
Looks there's some background music.
I love this song.
So,
And I see that we have to catch 10 stars this time instead of the 5 stars like we did last week.
wow. Excellent job, Khadija.
Great job! It's so amazing to see all of your submissions in our studio. Next, we're going to be looking at Drishan's project.
I see that there's a score variable and a life variable.
And I see that they've also tried changing the backdrop as well, and I really like it.
Awesome. So it looks like every time I touch a rock, my life goes down by 1. Oh
Oh
no!
no!
I lost, but excellent job, Deshaun.
There were so many excellent projects in this week's studio as well that followed the correct file naming protocol, but we couldn't showcase them all today. We're going to put them up on the screen so you can see the people who made them. Great. So let's move on. Hey Nardos, I really want to participate in the Coolest Projects competition, but it's all so overwhelming. I just don't know where to start.
Well, don't worry, Paula. The steps for making an awesome project are on the Coolest Projects competition website. So the link will be in the chat and in the description so that you all can check it out. And the best part is you can use these steps and this planning process to make any project, not just for the Coolest Projects competition.
Whoa, that's so cool.
So Paula, guess what time it is?
Is it 9:30?
No, silly. It's time to make our ice cream project.
Oh my gosh, I love ice cream. Chocolate is my favorite flavor. What's your favorite flavor of ice cream, Nardos?
That's a tough question. I'll go with mint chocolate chip.
Why don't you guys enter your favorite flavor of ice cream in the chat?
And while everyone does that, let's go ahead and look at our samples for today. There's music and we're hungry. Pressing the space bar to enter.
And the door opens for us as well. So we're at the starting from scratch ice cream shop.
Awesome. Let's look.
And oh wow, there's a whole menu of options. Oh, mango. Okay, let's choose mango.
Yeah, let's go ahead and put mango.
And we
We
can add
should
sprinkles as
definitely
well.
add sprinkles.
I agree. And they tell us how much we have to pay. And then they say goodbye. Wow, that was amazing. This project is slightly more advanced than what we're going to be doing today, and it was just to give you a flavor of what lies in store for today's lesson, pun intended.
So let's look at today's project. So there's no music this time. Let's enter the shop.
And we're back at the starting from scratch ice cream shop. And again, I see that there are many flavors for 150 rupees.
So it looks like we have less options now. Let's go with chocolate since that's your favorite.
Yeah.
Yay, our ice cream's up.
Yeah. And they say thank you again and goodbye. Nice. So this is what we started with when we had the idea for this project. Then over time, we were able to grow and grow and grow until the project became more advanced. Both of these samples are in the studio for this week. Now that we've seen the two projects, let's take a look at the storyline. And yeah, so we have two main characters to look at, the customer and the owner. Let's start by taking a look at the customer.
So first, the customer is welcomed into the shop. Then they're going to order their ice cream from a menu filled with the delicious options. And at the end, they receive their receipt and leave with the ice cream.
So first, we make the background for the beginning of our story. Then we have to make a menu and allow the customer to make a choice. And last but not the least, we give the customer a receipt and go to the ending backdrop.
So similarly, we can look at the story from the owner's point of view. They welcome the customer into the shop. Then they inform the customer of the ice creams that are available and take the customer's order. Then the owner gives the customer a receipt and wishes them a good day.
As you can see, even though the storyline is the same from different perspectives, we add different details to show the entire experience. Now let's take a look at our file naming protocol for this week.
So today's file naming protocol is shop followed by your name. So for you, Pallab, you'd say shop Pallab.
Okay, great.
So let's jump into our live demonstration.
So first, what we want to do is head over to the scratch.mit.edu website. Then we want to click on the Create button on the top left to create our new project. And keeping this week's file naming protocol in mind, we're going to name our project. So what are we going to call our project this week, Nardos?
Well, once we make sure that our project loads, we can name it Shop Mentors. But again, everyone else will name it Shop followed by their names.
Great.
So let's go ahead. What's our next step, Paulo?
So the plot is a little complex, right? So how do we come up with it? And what do programmers do to help them build projects like this?
Yeah, you're right. I've wondered this too.
So we need to use some computer science design thinking.
Whoa, what's that?
It's the way we design our program. We go through a cycle of defining the project, brainstorming ideas, making drafts, and testing. From our testing results, we want to understand the details of our design and make sure we interact with the audience in mind.
Oh, so we're basically asking ourselves questions to help us build our project.
Exactly. And in this project, we might think about what other Scratch programs have ice cream shops and what we can learn from looking at them. What skills do we not have and who can help us?
So just like we saw in the advanced version of the project, we can learn from looking at other projects. And for everyone tuning in, they're learning from the Starting from Scratch series.
Exactly. And today we're learning about user input blocks. So we want to make sure that we're empathizing by asking what the player wants and what will make the program fun for them. And so this design cycle is something that most competitions, including the Coolest Projects competition, asks us to share. They want to know how many different things you thought about while designing your project.
Wow, that's super important. This is why we go through planning our plot before making our projects. It really helps us stay organized so that we can make the best projects.
So when we design our program, we have to think about what makes the customer go into the shop and how can we make the design of the shop welcoming.
Yeah, and this project can grow and grow and grow, just like you said. So we want to make sure that we're thinking about changes and how long it's going to take to make those changes happen. So let's switch back to our Scratch project.
Great. And another reminder to everyone to register your project for the Coolest Projects competition because the last day of registering is May 3rd.
Awesome.
Okay?
So let's start out by deleting our cat sprite.
Yeah, so we don't need the cat sprite, so we're going to start by deleting it. And so then we're going to move on to step 1, which is showing that the customer is hungry. So we're going to start by making our own backdrop. So you want to click on stage and then choose a backdrop. And for this, we're going to choose the Blue Sky 2 backdrop because we want the text to be readable on top of the plain background. So we're going to choose a color for the background that lets us do so. So I'm thinking a lightish color. And on top of that, we're going to want to put some text as well. So when we're thinking of the text, we want to think about what's going to make the player go into the store. So I was thinking something like, I'm hungry. And so again, you want to make sure that the text is in a color that we can read on the background. So maybe like a yellow background for the black back and black text would be nice. And again, feel free to get creative with it. Try out different fonts, different sizes, different colors. And so I see Nardos here has chosen the marker font, which I'm a huge fan of because it's really bold and it catches your attention. And so now that that's done, we have our starting backdrop. So don't forget to name it Nardos because that way it's easier to reference when we come back to it later. So we're going to call it start for now. Perfect.
So now let's move on to the coding part.
So first we're going to need to choose our owner for the shop. So again, we're going to go to choose a sprite and we're going to choose a sprite from the already existing sprites. So for this one, which sprite do you want to choose, Nardos?
Let's go with Danny. So I'm going to search for Danny and click
And
enter.
yeah, perfect. So, whoa, our sprite is really, really big. So we're going to start by making it smaller. And
So
so
here,
we're going to adjust the size.
let's go with 70 for now. Perfect.
Great. Now let's check out the sprite's costumes. And since we only need one of these costumes, we're going to choose Danny B and we'll delete the rest. And now that we've gotten ourselves a sprite that we like, we're going to duplicate it. This is because our first goal is to make the owner wave at the customer.
Yep, so let's convert to bitmap so that it's easier for us to be able to manipulate the sprite parts.
Perfect. And there are so many tools that we can use. We have paintbrush tools, circular tool, box tool, and I can also see that there's a fill option and a text box.
Yeah, and there's also the eraser, the line tool, and the selector tool. And because we're creating a waving motion, we can use the selector tool and select from the elbow down.
Perfect. And so we're going to rotate it to make it look like she's waving, and we're going to join the elbow. And there's a lot of extra color on the sprite, so we're going to maybe erase it off using the eraser tool. And so you can adjust the size of the eraser so that you can get into the fine little edges that you want to erase, and we can zoom in so that we can see that as well. So we're just going to make the eraser a smaller size and do just that. So don't worry if it's not too perfect because we just want to get rid of some of the extra color. And great.
Perfect.
So then what are we going to do, Nardos?
Then let's go ahead and name this so that we can identify it. I'm going to call it waving. And we can duplicate it because waving isn't just putting your arm up. So let's go ahead and duplicate it. And this
Yep.
time, let's go ahead and select the arm again. But we want to make sure that it's closer to her face so that
Yeah,
we can
because
actually
you
see
wave
the
like
hands.
this.
Exactly.
So
So
that's great. Now we're gonna name that. We've got it waving 2, and we're going to name the first one standing because she is standing in the first one. And then we're done with the costumes. Perfect.
So let's move on to the code. So right now we're on the I'm hungry page, but we don't want Danny to show up. So we can hide
Yeah.
her by going to the events block, and when
And
green flag is clicked,
clicked.
we can hide.
And we're also going to be changing the backdrop later. So let's add a switch backdrop to block, and that'll make the program always start from this screen.
Awesome. So what's our next step?
Um, let's see how it looks before we move on to the next step. Let's just try out our code.
Yep,
Yay,
Danny's
it works
gone.
perfectly. So now let's move on to the next part of our story. Well, we have to show the start page, and after that, we need to show the front of the shop and allow the customer to enter whenever they want. So to do this, we need a new backdrop. So let's go on over to backdrops and click on choose a backdrop.
You know,
But
instead of making our own backdrop, we can actually go ahead and use what we've created in the studio. There's a project for you to be able to use all the backdrops and sprites.
and what's that called, Nardos?
It's called the backpack items in this week's studio.
Oh, so basically it just has a bunch of the sprites and backdrops we're going to be using today?
Yep, exactly.
Oh
It's
wow,
going
that's
to
so
take a while
cool.
to
So that's going to
load.
save us a lot of time while making these backdrops, right?
Definitely. So we want to click see inside.
And wow, I see that there are a lot of sprites over there.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and just grab all the sprites so that when we need it later in the program, we have all of them.
And we won't have to keep going back and forth.
Yeah, and we actually came here to get a backdrop. So we can click on the stage and go over to backdrops and grab all of these backdrops. So we want to get the front, the store, and the end.
These are all backdrops that we're going to be using later on in the program, and so it'll save us a lot of time when we're making this project. So let's
So
check out what we have.
back to our projects, we can go ahead and pull the backpack we need and pull the sprite, the backdrop that we need from the backpack. So we want the front of the store, so we can grab this front backdrop and drag it to our backdrops.
Great. So I see that we have the starting from scratch ice cream shop, and it's given us instructions to enter the shop as well.
Yeah, but we also need our door. So let's go ahead and drag our door sprite.
Perfect.
So we don't see our door. Why is that?
Um, is it because we haven't showed it? Oh my God, I see that. There's already some code written over there.
Yeah, so we actually want our backdrop to be hidden when we start. And we also don't need to switch the backdrop on this, so we can get rid of the switch backdrop block. But when green flag is clicked, we want to make sure that it's hidden. But we do want the door to show up when we're on this front page. So when backdrop switches to the front, we can show the door.
Perfect. Nardos, I have a brilliant idea. Why don't we add the door and let's make it open when the customer wants to enter the shop?
Yeah, so let's add the switch costume to block to make sure that it starts on the closed door. And let's test our code before we move on.
And uh-oh, why is it stuck?
Oh, we never switched to this backdrop that we just got from the backpack. So under Danny's sprite, let's go ahead and say to wait 2 seconds so that they can read this screen, and then we can go ahead and switch backdrop.
Great. And we also want to put the show block as well because we want the door to show up on the next screen, right?
Yeah, so under the door sprite, we switch to the closed door and we show up. So let's try it.
Okay, so let's try it out. Perfect. Uh-oh, why is the door covering our text?
Yeah, we need to drag the door to where we want it. And then add the go to block because the coordinates will already match what we just dragged it to. And we
Okay.
also want to make sure that we enter the shop when spacebar is pressed. So what do we do for that, Paulo?
So for that, we're going to use a when spacebar key is pressed.
Yep. And then we want to make sure that it opens. So let's use a switch costume to open door. Now let's test.
Great.
Yay, we did it.
Great. So how about a quick recap before we move on to the next step?
Okay, so first we started with our backdrop being on this start page where we say, I'm hungry. And we want to make sure that Danny is hidden. But we also want the customer to be able to read the screen. So we're adding a wait block so that we can wait 2 seconds.
And then for the door, let's go over to that workspace. So we have the when green flag clicked block. We want to hide the door because we don't want the door to show up on the first screen. And then when we switch the backdrop, right, we want the door to show up on this front page. And then when we click on the spacebar, the door will open.
Yep. So what's our next step, Paulo, once the door opens?
So the next step is to change to the next backdrop.
So under backdrops, we can drag our store backdrop that we already got from our backpack.
Wow, that's perfect. But Nardos, how do you make the little checkers on the screen? Doesn't that look a little difficult?
Yeah, let's go over the steps on how to do that. So you want to select the box tool and pick a darkish color so that it can look like a checkered backdrop. Then you can start filling in boxes at the end. And once you've already made your first box, you can do Control and V, Control C to copy, and then Control V to paste. So Control C on your keyboard and then Control V. Now
so I don't actually have to draw this every single time?
No, and we can continue doing this until we have the size that we want. But this takes way too long, so we have already made this backdrop for you, and you can use the one that you put in your backpack.
That way you don't have to keep copy and pasting these checkers.
Yep, so let's go back to our code.
Great. So what's our next step, Nardos?
Well, we want to make sure that when we switch into the store that we have Danny's show. So first, let's go ahead and switch the backdrop to the store when the space key is pressed.
And what if we put a little wait block before that so we can see the door opening, and then we can have the backdrop switch to the next one?
Yep. Okay. So let's go ahead and switch backdrop to the store. And now we can also have Danny show up because she needs to be inside of the store. Let's test the code.
Uh-oh, why is the door on our screen?
Yeah, we need to go ahead and hide it. But first, let's make sure that we wait long enough for us to be able to see the door open. So let's change this wait block to 2 seconds. And under the door sprite, we can go ahead and when backdrop switches to the store, hide the door because we're already inside.
So that looks like it should work, right?
Yep, let's test it out.
So it waits, and then we click the spacebar, and then it waits 2 seconds, and then it opens. I mean, it switches the backdrop. Perfect. And now the door isn't on the screen either.
Yeah, so now we need to have a counter so that Danny can be behind it.
Exactly. Now, how do we make a counter? Because I know you can't layer items on a backdrop.
Yeah, so why don't we go ahead and make our own? Under choose a sprite, we can click the paint option. And we can make sure to name it counter. Then
And
use the box tool.
yeah, so we're going to be drawing 3 rectangles to make the counter, right? Because so 2 for the legs and 1 for the body of the counter. And so you can, again, feel free to mess around with the colors, try out different stuff. And so we're going to make the leg first. And so we can take this leg and copy it using the same little trick we learned earlier. Press Control C and then Control V. And then we're going to take the leg to the other side. Oh, okay, so this is for the body, I see. And so we're rotating it. And then we're going to paste another one for the legs. Uh-oh. Yeah. So while she does that, once again, for those of you just joining us, today we're making a game about ice cream. And we're going to an ice cream shop and we're buying an ice cream that lets us choose from a variety of flavors. Okay, so it looks like we're almost done with the counter.
Yep, and let's go ahead and move it on the stage so that it's exactly where we want the counter to be.
Perfect. So now we want the counter to go there every time the code starts. So
Yeah,
how do we do
so
that, Nardos?
when we go to our green flag clicked block, we want to make sure that the counter is hidden because again, we are not on the backdrop for it to show up yet. So let's go ahead and hide it. But when we switch our backdrop to the store, we want it to show up. So, and we want it to show up in this exact space. So we can go ahead and grab the go to block, add that in, and then go ahead and show it.
Perfect.
Let's test our code while Pallab tells us our next step.
So next we're going to be working on the owner, Danny. And so, oh, perfect. So the counter shows up and we have Danny as well.
Now we want Danny to show up in the place that we want her to. So I'm going to move her over here. But we also want to make sure in the counter workspace that the counter is in front of Danny. So we're going to go ahead and grab the go to block and add that in before it shows up. And now under Danny, we can add the go to block so that she shows up exactly where we want her to. Now let's test again.
Click the spacebar and the door opens. And perfect.
Awesome. So how about we have Danny wave?
Yeah, okay, so we already made the waving costume, right? So let's add the switch costume to standing block, since we know we're going to be switching the costumes. And so we're going to start from standing when she enters the store, when the customer enters the store, and then we're going to put a wait block and then switch the costume to the waving costume.
And we're going to want to make sure that we do it again where we switch to our second our waving costume. So now we can go ahead and test.
Uh-oh.
I think it looks a little awkward. So why don't we go ahead and repeat this motion over and over again?
So what happened right now is Danny waved only once because that's all we told her to do. But since we want her to wave multiple times, we're using this repeat block. And you can change the number in the repeat block to how many ever times you want her to wave. So for now, we're just going to keep it at 2 and see how that works. And don't forget that we want her to be in the standing position after she's done waving, right? So what we've done here is we started with the standing position, then we've repeated the waving motion twice, and we've put a little wait between each of the waving costumes. And then after we're done waving, we want her to go back to standing straight. So let's test our code again. And
yay, that
perfect.
works. So how about Danny says hello and welcome to the shop at the same time as she's waving?
So since we want both those things to happen at the same time, right? We want her to wave and say hello at the same time. Let's add the when backdrop switches to store block because she's going to be waving when the backdrop switches to store. And so we can also make her say hello when the backdrop switches to store. And we're going to add a wait block so that she has the time to move to the right position before she starts saying something.
Let's test our code. What's our next step, Pallab?
So once again, we're going to want Danny to move around a little bit maybe before she says hello. Or before she says her next step. So we're going to use the move steps block, and we're going to use around 100 steps.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, and now we want Danny to welcome the customer into the shop. So after the move block, we're going to use another say block. And what are we writing for this one, Nardos?
Welcome to the starting from scratch ice cream shop.
Great. And since this one is a little longer statement, let's add a little more time for this say block to show.
Perfect. So let's test the code.
Let's see how this works. Use the spacebar to enter the shop, and she waves at us. She says hello, and welcome to the starting from scratch ice cream shop, just like we wanted it to.
Awesome. So now we can go ahead and start with our menu process.
So now we're halfway through the plot. If you've made it this far, congratulations to everyone. And so we've switched back to the presentation. And so the next step in the story is to show the menu and ask which flavor the customer wants. And so for that, we're going to use a list in Scratch. But what are lists, you might ask? Lists in Scratch are just like lists we use in our daily life. You might have used a grocery list, a to-do list, or any other list. And so a list is a container that holds other values. And so they are grouped under name, which could be an identifier, just like in variables.
Oh, I get it. So what are some examples?
So again, as I said earlier, a grocery list is a good example of a list. It has a list of all the items you want to go or buy from the grocery store. And similarly, a to-do list is another good example. And last but not least, you have a family name. Something which might not seem like a list at first is actually a list. So when I say the Patels, right, I'm referring to the entire family of Patels, which includes the mother, father, and the child.
Wow, I've never thought about it like that. So let's make our list while Pallab tells us the steps to doing so.
Yeah, so we're going to switch over to our program, and so there are 3 steps to making a list. First, we're going to go into the Variable tab and select the Make a List option underneath all the variable blocks. And then let's name the lists. What do you want to name this list?
I'm going to go with menu so that it's clear and we know what it's for.
And look, just like the variables, the blue check mark allows us to see the list on stage.
Yeah, and we can go ahead and move it with our mouse, and we can even make it smaller if we want to.
And so the name of the list shows up on the top, but the list is empty, but this area is where the items of the list are shown. And lastly, the amount of items is shown at the length of the list at the bottom. And so we're going to move the slide, move the list so that's not covering the title. And yeah, that's perfect. And so when the customer first enters the store, we don't want to show the list. But when the owner asks the customer which flavor they want, we want the list to be seen.
Yep, so I can hide the list.
Yeah. We're going to use a hide list block when the green flag is clicked, because at the beginning, we don't want the list to show up on screen. But later on, once the customer is going to order, right, we want the menu to show up on screen, obviously, so he can make his choice. And so we want the list to show up on screen.
Yeah, so let's have Danny introduce the list, and I'm going to add another move block and a say block so that she says we have a variety of flavors. Each for how much should we have it for, Pallab?
I think 150 rupees sounds good.
Awesome. So 100, and I'll make sure this is 3 seconds. And we can add another say block so that she says, take a look. And now we have finally show our list. So let's go ahead and add the show list menu block.
Perfect.
And now let's
Now,
test.
let's test our code. Yep.
What are our next steps, Paulo?
So the next thing we're going to want to do is add our items to the list, right? So whichever items we want in our menu, we're going to use that. So again, welcome to the starting from scratch ice cream shop. And then we have a variety of flavors. She says, take a look. And the list shows up on screen. That looks perfect. So now
Yeah,
all we
it's
have to do
empty.
is we just have to add the elements to the list. Yeah. So which flavors do you want to add, Nardos?
So using the add block, I'm going to start out with vanilla. And I'm going to duplicate this block so that I can also add strawberry.
And can
And
we do chocolate
finally,
as well?
yep, your favorite,
Yeah.
chocolate.
Okay, so that looks perfect. Let's just test it out one more time to see how it works. And
Let's take a look. And here's our list. Oh, why do we
uh-oh,
have 6 in our list?
I thought we put only 3 things. Wait a minute.
Yeah,
Is it being
so
repeated?
it's because we told our computer that every time we click the green flag, we want to add these items to the list. But in order to fix this, if we delete all of the items in the list before we add these new items, then we'll always have 3. So let's go ahead and test it again to see if that worked.
So basically what this is doing is it's clearing the list before we click, before it adds the elements again. So it looks like we just have three elements in our list. Right, Nardos?
Yep, exactly. So let's see if that worked.
And it
It
works.
works. I'm going to go
Wow.
ahead and make it a little smaller again.
And wow, look at all the code we've gotten just for this sprite. If you're following along, congratulations. This is a pretty complicated project to do, and you're doing an absolutely amazing job. And don't worry if it's a little bit too complicated. We have lots of resources down in the description which you can check out after the episode, and they give you step-by-step instructions for the same.
Yeah, so let's break down the next part of the project.
Yeah, and we're going to switch to the presentation, and we just want to make sure we're being as clear as possible. So we're just
So we're
going
going
to
to be
load.
showing the process of taking the customer's order.
Yeah,
So
and so we're going to use the function block to call the function. And then that's going to call the function, of course. And so we're going to make the function, which is basically going to be what's the function going to be for, Nardos?
it's going to be for picking and for the ordering process where we're picking the flavor that we want. So let's go ahead and make the function.
Yeah, and for those of you that joined us last week, you already know how to make functions. And so what we do the reason we use a function is to basically make a complex piece of code into one single block. So even though we have to code for that block, it just makes the code look a lot easier on the eyes. So instead of having all these chunks of blocks of code together, we're just going to be splitting it up and making it a little bit easier to follow. So we've named this function pick flavor because it's going to be the function that allows the customer to choose the flavor.
Yep, and we know that we've successfully made the function once we have a define block in our workspace and the function block under my blocks. So what's the first step in the flavor function?
So, oh yeah, so before we do that, to ask the customer what flavor they want, we're giving the customer more options, right? And this helps interact with the customer. The program makes it more interactive. So for this, we're going to use the ask and answer block.
Yeah, so let's ask which
Oh, sorry, ask
flavor
and wait. Yeah.
of ice cream would you like?
So this is going to ask a question and wait on the screen, and it'll give the user time to input their choice. And
Yeah,
so
and
once they input their choice,
go
it's
ahead.
going to be saved as a temporary variable, which we're going to call answer.
Yeah, and we want to make sure that we know this variable so that when we show the ice cream, then we can keep track of which one we want to show. So we want to go under variables and make a new variable. And let's name this flavor. It's going to keep track of the flavor they chose. And we can set flavor to the answer that the user put in. So let's go ahead and test the code. Oh, and it looks like flavor is selected, so I can go ahead and unselect it because we don't want it to show up.
Exactly. So just like lists, you can also do the same thing for variables, where you click on the blue tick mark and it'll stop it from showing up on the screen.
Yep, so let's see it run.
Take a look.
Perfect. Okay.
Perfect.
Oh, so it looks like this never ran. Why is that?
I'm not quite sure, Nardos. Why don't you tell us?
So looking at all our code, we show the menu, but we never called the function. So under my blocks, we're going to use this pick flavor block. And after showing the menu, we're going to call it. And now let's test our code.
By calling the function, we're telling the program to run that block of code that we've named the function. So it should work this time.
Yep, let's see what happens.
Perfect. Now let's
go
go
ahead
back.
and pick vanilla.
Okay.
Nothing happens. So
Why is
to break down our next step, why don't we go back to the presentation and take a look.
Once again, for those of you just joining us, today we're making a project about ice cream. And so what we're doing is a slightly less advanced version of what we showed you at the beginning. And so if you want to check out the resources for all of this, they're in the studio, and there are lots of resources in the description as well. So please make sure to take a look at those.
Yeah, so now after we've already asked for the question, we want to put in the flavor that we want. But then the computer needs to ask, is the flavor in the menu? If it is, then Danny's going to repeat the order back to the customer and show them their receipt. And then the ice cream will show up on the counter.
Whoa, that's a lot of steps. But not to worry, we're going to go through it one step at a time and guide you through the process.
Yeah, and if the flavor is not in the menu, then Danny's going to tell the customer that the flavor is not in the menu and to try again. And we're going to want to repeat the process of asking until there's at least one item in the receipt. So let's go ahead and start with the coding.
Okay, so under all the list blocks, right? Let's go to the list blocks. And so it says this contains block. Do we see the contains block?
Yep, contains.
Great. And it allows us to check if something that we're specifically looking for is inside the list that we're looking at. So again, what we want to do first is we want to see what the customer has inputted, and we want to check if that's in our menu. Right, Nardos?
Yeah, so we're going to use an if-else block so that we can write the code for when it is in the menu and when it's not. So let's get an operator and let's get the equals. Oh, wait, no. First, we just need to make sure that it's in the menu. So if menu contains, and let's go ahead and get our flavor variable. So if the menu contains our variable, then remember our first step is to have Danny say it. So
yeah, so we want her to repeat back the order to the customer, right? Just like all receptionists do.
Yeah, and for Danny, in order for us to be able to type in the say block and use the flavor so that we can repeat the order back, we're going to go under operators and pick the join block and put it inside. So say you picked, and we
remember the order is saved. What is the order saved as, Nardos? How will we remember the order?
Which order are you talking about?
The person's order, what they've inputted.
Yeah, so for the order, we want to use the flavor variable. So we want to say you picked the flavor. And then we want to add it to a receipt. So in order to do that, let's go ahead and make our receipt list. So we're going to click make a list and let's name it bought items so that we can keep track. So now we can go ahead and unselect this because we don't want to see this. But after Danny repeats the order back, we can go ahead and we can add the flavor to bought items. And that's how we're going to know.
Great.
So
So let's move on to the next one, or do you want to just quickly test it out?
let's quickly test. But
Okay.
while we're waiting, our next step is going to be able to handle what happens when the flavor we pick is not in the menu. So
Yeah.
for that, we want to make sure that Danny repeats back that the order is not in the menu and to please try again. So now
So
let's try vanilla. So we have it, but we can't see our bought items list yet. So we actually don't want to see it yet until Danny tells the person how much they have to pay. So let's go ahead and handle what happens when the menu does not contain the flavor. We can add the say block.
so we're going to do something pretty similar, right? So again, we're going to put the say block, and then we're going to say this flavor is not we in the menu, right?
Is not in the menu.
Perfect.
And please try again.
Okay.
And because we want this process to repeat, after all, we did tell our person to try again, we're going to need a repeat block. And we're going to use the repeat until. And we're going to make sure that all our code is this repeat until block. And we're going to know how long we want to repeat by looking at how long the receipt is. So we can say that we want to repeat until the length of bought items is greater than 0. But we need to go under operators and get the greater than sign. And we can say greater than 0, the length of bought items.
Perfect.
So
So
let's
that's
test.
a lot of code. So once we see this, we're just going to quickly go through it again and then move on to the next step.
Yep.
And it
So
says hello, starting from scratch ice cream shop.
and now let's try a flavor that's not on this list.
Uh-oh.
Oh, looks like we never deleted our bought items list. So the length was already greater than 1. So we can go ahead and just like we deleted this menu, we can duplicate it. Oops. And we can make sure that we also delete all of the bought items. Now let's test again.
That way both of the lists start off empty and there's no confusion.
Yep, exactly. So we're looking at our flavors in a second. And I'm going to choose mango. And let's see if it tells me to try again. Perfect.
Wow.
So
And we can
now
enter
let's
again.
try vanilla. We picked vanilla and it tells us again. Great. And now let's go ahead and show the receipt. So
Great.
after pick flavor, we want to make sure that we hide the menu. So we can go ahead and under variables, grab the hide menu block. Make sure we select hide menu. And then we can introduce the receipt.
So we want to make sure that we only add an item to the receipt if it's in the menu that we offer. So how are we going to do that? Oh,
So
so first
first,
we're
I'm just going to finish, saying your total is 150 rupees because that's what we said it costs. And let's go ahead and show the list. Okay, now let's test out our code and we can move on to the ice cream.
yeah, I cannot wait to see the ice creams.
Me too. So hello. And we want to make sure for the ice cream that we only show the ice cream if the menu contains the flavor. And we've already added it to the receipt. So let's pick vanilla. Pick vanilla, our total.
There's 150
Awesome.
rupees.
So
Perfect.
I'm going to move this over here again so that it's easy to see, and I'll make it smaller. And now we can start our ice cream process. If you
Perfect.
remember, we already have the ice cream Sprite in our backpack. So let's go ahead and add it to our program.
This backpack seems to really be coming in handy. That way we don't have to keep making sprites and new backdrops every time.
Okay, so let's go ahead and go to costumes. Look, we have a regular cone and we have a vanilla. Awesome.
Wow.
Yeah, so for our ice cream, let's go back and look for a second. We're going to make 3 flavors. We're going to make a chocolate flavor, a strawberry flavor, and we already have the ice cream flavor. And we're going to do this by duplicating and changing the color. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to right click and duplicate.
Perfect. And we just need to change the color, right?
Yeah, after
So
I
what
change
color?
the name.
Yeah. So changing the name is important. And then what color are we going to make this?
So I'm going to click on the fill button. And since this is strawberry, we have to pick a pink color. So perfect. And now we can click on the scoop. There, we have our strawberry.
Perfect.
Let's make some chocolate.
And so for the chocolate, we're going to do brown, right? So first we're going to rename it.
Chocolate. Then let's change our fill color and go for brown.
Perfect.
Okay, and click on it. Perfect. Now we have our chocolate flavor as well. So
Great.
now let's go over to our code. So the cone is already hidden, but we need to know when we want to show it. Let's go back to Danny. So in Danny's Sprite, we have all this code, but wouldn't it be so cool to have the empty cone, and then once they pick the flavor that's in the menu, we can have them show the scoop that they have?
Yeah, that would be really cool.
Yeah,
So how are we
remember,
going to do that?
yep, so remember that this is Sprite to Sprite communication, so we need to broadcast. So before we ask the flavor, let's broadcast a message, and we can say new message and click show cone and click OK. But then we also need another message so that it can show the exact flavor the person chose. So under the if block, after you add the flavor to the bot items, you're going to want to create a new message and say show flavor. Okay.
Mhm.
And now we can go back to our ice cream so that we can make this show up. So we want to, because we already told the ice cream when to show up, we can use the when I receive block. So when I receive show cone, we can make sure that under looks, we have the switch costume block and
we need to switch
exactly
it
to the regular
cone. Right. So the first is going to be the cone, and then going to show it.
And we can duplicate this code because even though we don't need these last 2 blocks, we need to handle what happens when the backdrop, when the sprite receives the message show flavor.
Yeah. So then we're going to want to switch the costume, right?
Yeah, but we want to make sure that we switch the costume exactly to what the person ordered it to be. So let's use an if statement.
And so this is basically going to check which flavor the customer has ordered.
Yeah, so we can say if flavor equals, and that means we need an operator block. We can use the equal sign. So if the flavor equals vanilla, we want to switch the costume to the vanilla
costume. Exactly.
Yep. And we can duplicate this code so that we can make sure this happens for the strawberry. And make sure you also change the costume. Yep.
Yep.
Okay, then now we can test our code. Let's take a look.
Now let's check it out.
We still see our bot items. We have to make sure we hide that. So before we continue, let's go back, and just like we hid the list for the menu, we can hide
the list
the bot items list. Yep. Yeah, let's test it out now. Hungry. Okay, so we're greeting the customer.
Yep.
And we're going to take a look at our flavors.
And so again, let's enter. Uh-oh.
So it looks like our ice cream cone just showed up in the middle of the screen.
Uh-oh.
But everything else seems to be working. So we can go ahead and drag the ice cream to where on the counter we want it. And this
And
fixes
then,
the coordinates here.
yeah, and then we're going to use the go-to block, right? And tell it to go to these coordinates when
Before
it's
it
supposed to
shows
show
up.
up. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so let's test that. And after this, our steps is going to be to wave goodbye and thank the customer for coming.
Exactly. So now we already have the waving process, right, Nardos?
Yeah, so we're actually going to make it much easier and duplicate the code that we already have. So let's make sure everything works.
And we want, what are we choosing? We're choosing vanilla.
Pallab, total.
Perfect.
Awesome. So now we can go ahead and duplicate our waving.
Uh-oh. Yeah,
It's right
perfect.
here, so make sure you
So
find it.
yeah,
Duplicate
and
the
so
code.
by duplicating this code, we're going to be using it for the owner to say goodbye to the customer this time.
Yeah, but before we wave, I'm actually going to go ahead and add a say block to say thank you. Shopping at starting from scratch.
Perfect. And let's keep that on for a little bit longer than 2 seconds because again, it's a pretty long message.
Yep.
And
And
let's test it out.
so now we can go ahead and after this code runs, make sure that we have our ending backdrop so that we can finish our ice cream project.
Perfect.
Okay, so we have our flavors.
Take a
Let's
look.
see. And for you, Pallab, I'm going to go ahead and pick chocolate.
Yes.
There we go.
And 150 rupees and the bought items.
So thank you for shopping at Starting from Scratch. And she waves. Great. So
Good job.
now let's go ahead and get our ending backdrop. So under backdrops, go ahead to the backdrops tab. And since we've already gotten our backdrop in our backpack, we can go ahead and drag this end costume for the backdrop and drag it in.
Perfect.
So now we have
Take a look
our
at it.
ending backdrop.
And good.
So
And we want to hide all of these sprites so they don't show up on the ending screen. So let's quickly do that.
So before we do that, I'm going to actually make sure that we switch the backdrop.
All right.
So switch the backdrop to the end, and then let's hide Danny. And then for the counter, we want to hide it when the backdrop switches. So when backdrop switches to
end, we're going to hide it again.
Yeah. And I know we need this code for the ice cream Sprite as well. So what can we do?
We can duplicate it.
Yeah, so we can do this by dragging it into the backpack. So once we put it in our backpack, we can go to the ice cream and go ahead and drag this code in. And it shows up at the top. So now we hide it. And lastly, the door. We need the door to show up so that it looks like the customer just walked right out the front door. So let's go ahead and get the when backdrop switches to block. So when it switches to the end, then we want to show. But remember, we also want to be on the closed costume. So switch costume to
closed door.
How about we test our code?
Let's do it.
Okay, so we're hungry. Let's press the space bar.
She says hello.
Awesome. So let's look at our menu. I haven't picked strawberry yet, so let's look at that. Strawberry. Yay, our strawberry ice cream.
Great. And
shopping.
We have the bought items list.
Oh, so we never hid the bought items list.
So we're going to use the hide list item.
Yep. Block. So after Danny says thank you, we can hide the bought items list. And
perfect.
Test.
One last time. And so spacebar. She says hello.
Okay,
Starting
so
from scratch, ice cream shop, 150 rupees, and we look at the menu.
let's go ahead and pick strawberry again.
Mhm.
Awesome! Yay, we did it! So now
Great.
that we're done, we can click File and Save Now. Then make sure you share your project. And
Mhm.
let's go ahead and add instructions. So click the green flag to start. And in our notes and credits, we want to say starting from scratch, class number 7.
And let's remember to put the instructions after this as well.
Yeah, I already have instructions to click the green flag to start.
Yeah, okay.
And then we can say Stem Impressionists, CodeTigers. Then we can go ahead and add it to our studio. So let's go ahead and open our studio. It's going to take a while to load.
You guys can also submit your projects on our studio. And remember to add the instructions and notes and credits. And then finally, just add your project to the studio so we can spotlight it next week.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so, yeah,
So we're going to click Add Projects. And down here, we're going to select Shop Mentors, which is the project we just made. And now it's in our backdrop. So, in our studio. So now, congratulations, you've made all this code and our demo is over, which means that it is, what is it time for?
Menti time.
Yep, it is game time. So you can scan this QR code or follow the link in the chat and go to menti.com and put in this code right here, which is also shown on the screen.
And remember, the Coolest Projects competition is open and you can scan the QR code, which will be shown later, or follow the link in the chat to register.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and start the Menti.
Yeah.
Let's see people joining. Okay,
Wow.
awesome. So I see an umbrella and a watermelon and a
And
banana.
is that a bear?
I see cake.
I see a football.
It would be really cool if we had ice cream as
That
one
would
of
be
the things.
amazing. I see
Yeah.
cake. That's pretty close.
Yeah, yep. And I see a ghost. Type in the chat which ones you all are, which icons. Look, it's like a bunny or a rabbit.
That's so cute.
And a
Ooh,
samba
wolf.
and a burger. Yum.
I see watermelon as well.
Yeah, all this food.
It's making me hungry.
Me too. A snowman and a penguin.
So cute.
And a snake, a hat, bird. Wow.
Wow, we have lots of people joining us today.
Yeah, and I see more are still joining, so we'll give you a couple more seconds and then we'll get started with our Menti.
Ooh, I see a magician's hat over there.
Yeah.
Ooh, and a
I
donut. I
see
love donuts.
donut. Yum.
I haven't had donuts in so long.
Me too. Okay, so I think we should go ahead and get started.
Yep. And
So which class range are you in? And we have 10 more seconds to answer.
oh wow, it's really close.
Wow, look at these even numbers. Yeah. And I also think I skipped the gender question, so let's go ahead and ask that too. So now, what is your gender? And you're going to have a couple seconds to do this as well before we start our next questions. So we have 8 more seconds. And let's take a
Three,
look.
2, 1. Oh, wow,
Oh,
we have lots of girls joining us today.
yay, awesome. Okay, so now let's move into our next question. But first, let's look at the leaderboard. Cool. Okay, let's see the results. Awesome. Now let's go ahead into the questions
About
and
today's
start
lesson.
the countdown. Yep.
Yeah.
And Paula, why don't you read us the question and answer choices?
So, which of the following is a list? So our first option is menu, then the Johnsons, like the family name. Then you have oil pastels in a box, B and C, and all of the above. Perfect. Uh-oh.
So for all of you that said menu, that is correct. But remember, we talked about family names and how we can think of those as lists because the name is the identifier and the items in the list are the people that are in the family. So great job, everyone. Next question.
It's okay. We'll get the next one for sure.
Yep.
Okay. So, what is the keyboard shortcut for copy and pasting? Remember, we did this one while making the backdrop.
It's a little tricky. 5 seconds left. Oh, 3 seconds left.
1 second. Wow!
Awesome job. So it looks like almost everyone got it correct.
That's so great to see.
Question 5.
How do you know when you've been successful at creating a function? Define block and function block, define block and wait block, and function block and say block.
Let's see. Wow, it looks like most people got it right again. Excellent
Great
job.
job, guys.
Next question. Look at our leaderboard. Let's see if things changed.
Ooh, it's all neck and neck right now.
Whoa, awesome job. Now, next question.
How do you get the correct XY coordinates for the sprite?
Yep, you want to look closely at the picture. 3 seconds left. So you might have been a little confused on this one, but we want to make sure that we don't want to guess the numbers for the coordinate. We know that if we drag it or change it in the stage, then we have the correct option. So the answer is B and C.
Yep, so you can estimate the coordinates, but to get the exact coordinates, you need to move the sprite to where you want to check the coordinates.
Yep, and this is our last quiz question.
You are working with a partner to plan out your program for the coolest project competition. What part of the design cycle is that? Read the options carefully.
1 second. This was actually a little confusing for me too. I know I got it wrong. Since we're planning out the project with our partner, then that's the define part of the design cycle. But remember, you can look at the design cycle in the resources that will be posted after the live stream.
Yep, and they'll help you not only plan out your coolest projects competition, but all projects in the future.
Yeah, so let's look at our winner for today.
Ooh.
Excellent job, Sai.
Great job. Yep, that's how you say it.
Okay, so excellent job. And we have 2 more questions to ask you all. So, are you going to participate in the coolest projects competition? Okay, so we got some responses coming in.
Wow, I see a lot of yeses.
Maybes and a lot of yeses. Well. Yeah, I'm definitely going to participate. And I know Pallab said he might, but I'm going to convince him too.
I think I'm going to participate as well.
Yeah, competitions allow us to improve our skills. Exactly.
Yep. And there's so many resources that can help me out as well.
Definitely. Okay, so now we can move on to our last question. Let us know which city in India or country outside of India that you're joining us from.
And please remember to enter the spelling of the city correctly. So for example, if you're from New Delhi, you can enter Delhi. Uh, yeah, wow, it's so great to see people joining us from all over India.
Wow. Okay, so I see
Oh, I see
Mumbai.
UAE as well. Nice.
Awesome. I see Nigeria. Wow, that's awesome.
That's so cool.
So we see some more responses coming in.
Wow.
This is so great to see because I know that I'm in Virginia, USA, and Pallab is in Bangalore, India.
Exactly. And it's amazing to see people joining us from all over the world.
Yeah, that's so amazing. Remember to continue telling your friends about starting from scratch so that you all can learn together. Okay,
Great.
looks like that's all our responses. So let's go back to our presentation.
Yep. And once again, remember that the Coolest Projects competition is open and you can scan the QR code or follow the link in the chat to register.
Yep, and don't forget to check out the class resources in the YouTube description box below.
If you haven't already, click the subscribe button down below and the bell to get notified every time we go live. And join us next week for kites, cookies, and samosas. You don't want to miss it.
Yep, so see you next week, everyone.
Bye-bye, everyone.